Test. That works for you? You can hear sound. All right, how are we doing? How is everybody? Looks like a ton of people dropped. They didn't like my teaching style and all my jokes.
I'm good.
You're good?
They're good.
You like my jokes?
No, I don't.
Man. Guys, you can drop. It's fine. No, don't drop. Okay, how's everybody's week going? How was everybody's weekends? Good weekends? Anybody do anything like super crazy cool?
Oh.
Yeah?
I threw a balcony.
You threw a couch over a balcony. Like there was a balcony hanging off a building. You were on one side of it. You had some friends like, and then I went over.
Like in a.
Man, was this CrossFit?
Spring cleaning.
Spring cleaning. All right. I have a friend who's super into CrossFit, and at one point, he's advanced talking me into watching a documentary about the CrossFit Games on Netflix. It is as boring as it sounds, but one of the like guys who ends up winning one of his workouts, so like how he wakes up in the morning, is he goes out into the backyard and throws kegs over his house.
Over.
Over. Yeah, like over the whole house.
Is it a ranch? Ranch house? Like
Yeah, it's like it's not.
Or
It's a keg.
Pick up.
It's a keg. Yeah, it's empty. It's empty. Otherwise, I don't know, when it lands, you might have some crazy stuff going on. But yeah. Yeah, that's cool. Did you throw the couch over your balcony yourself, or did you have this CrossFit guy helping?
No, I wish.
Yeah, it would have made it super easy. It's just like one-handed, like boop, alley-oop. Yeah, we're all really curious. We're gonna talk about this for a while. It's a two-story house. The balcony's on the second floor.
You're just throwing it into those being taken. The couch is really old and it's
Yeah.
getting picked up.
Yeah.
Like, okay, you don't need to really take it down though. Just
It does a lot easier than like taking it down the stairs.
Right.
I don't know. Did it break?
Video people want to see it.
Yeah, maybe we'll like. Is it on YouTube? Can we like put it up here or something? It's on Instagram. All right, yeah, we can watch that. I think we can pull up Instagram up here. Man, cool. Does anybody have a toy that can stop that? That can top that? No, I don't. Cool. All right. Well, what did you guys think of the homework? This is 5 on the homework. We're at like 5s, 4s, 3. All right. Sweet. That's great. That's awesome. That is so awesome. It's like overall, it seems like we're all doing really well. That's great. That's exactly what we want. Today we're going to talk about functions. Functions are going to continue or be the next sort of core language feature that we're going to learn before we do objects. Here's our sort of rough outline for the day. We're going to do another review. It's going to be a couple more exercises, pretty similar to the ones that you guys had for our homework. And then we're going to talk about functions all day. We're going to touch on something called functional programming, which is one of the paradigms that is incorporated into JavaScript as a language. And then if we've got time, we'll do this exercise. But my hunch is that this exercise is going to end up being homework instead. So that's that. So we've got two, if everybody is a Git pull upstream master, you'll get all the updated files for today's class. And included in your pull will be two warm-up files, o1_warmup.js and o2_warmup.js. We're going to divide up into groups, and each group is going to work on one of these, and then the first group that finishes wins. The whole class. You win the whole class. Oh no, I took that out. Never mind. Okay, so no winners today. Sorry. My bad.
What's the name of the warm-up it's called?
Yeah. So there's it's a warm-up folder, and then in that there's two files. How should we divide up into teams? How about you guys are a team? So you're with the Scrum functions? Yeah, 04 functions. Why don't you two go and join these two in the back, and then why don't you guys do? Does that sound good? Sorry.
Are we doing warm-up one?
You guys do one, you guys do two, and then you guys do one. Okay.
It's under warm-up.
It's under warm-up, yeah. Yes, I think it's gonna be, there's more room back there, so I think that'll be easier. Obviously, if you guys have any questions, raise your hand. I do expect this to be a group activity,
Can you see?
so chat with your buddies.
It's like something's locked.
It says it's locked.
It's not locked. There's index not locked.
Okay. Okay, so we need to find the 100. How do you calculate yes? Okay, yeah, coding.
So, I should say we're going to go.
Well, what is, how do we want to list it? We gotta list your numbers and then we'll but our question is yeah. List it.
Oh, okay.
So I like choice. So let's do crime.
Yeah, go ahead now, you're putting this there. You might even want to go around.
We can send it to her.
Oh.
Yeah, it's going to be safe. Yeah, right, plus.
No.
You can just take it like I did.
I changed it earlier.
Oh, sorry. But it's still like, oh.
We did, I did 4 last time, and first 2 included having to calculate prime numbers, and the 2 core groups that got stuck with those ones, then just trying to figure out how to calculate the prime number accurately, and like,
These aren't all,
so I got
exactly what we did.
But you were fine. No, I should have.
It won't give the numbers.
10,000 versus crime.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I
I
think Zach, I don't know.
Yeah, so it would be like. First, I need to
What's what?
know
It's a thing that message was like, this is generated by you, whatever number you want.
Okay, one sec.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
It's
But at the beginning, the length is, yeah, and change it. Actually, let's start simple, let's start simple. Great, so let's start simple. Let's do this. Do you want us to try to find another one?
No, hold tight.
So I do have to. Or whatever. Oh, it says, Wait, sorry, was that a yes to try to everything?
No, hold on. I'm updating them now. Sorry.
And I don't want. But I feel like we just want to.
Yeah.
Okay, could I have everybody's attention? So I accidentally pushed the wrong exercise box. And the ones that I pushed are really, really complicated. And the ones that I actually meant to delete. The two that we did last time, they involved calculating a prime number. And last time we did this, students spent the entire time just trying to figure out how to accurately calculate a prime number and couldn't get through the rest of it. So there's like formulas you can get online, but we ran into problems with that. So we're not going to do those. I just pushed the correct exercise files. If you've changed or 01, if you made any changes to either of the warm-up files, what you need to do is go to the terminal and run git stash before you do git pull upstream master. Yeah, or don't press it. So these are the two exercises.
What was the stash?
Git stash.
What did that do?
should only be 2 warm-ups now?
There should, I'm always open. But they should look like this. I've got these backwards.
The homework.
This is number 1, this is number 2.
Yeah.
Number 1. Okay.
Oh, man.
Sorry. Sorry.
Yeah, I was. And other times. This is why.
It's shift forward.
What's going on? You're doing like active. Causing all these problems. Unbelievable. There we go. Breathe. Alright. Cats in for the nausea. That's what it is. Cat. So it's right. Yeah. So why don't you guys? You guys, what's the warm-up exercise that you guys do?
One.
Why don't you guys do 2? And then y'all here are going to. No, I have that. Oh yeah. 4 minutes. No.
Yeah. All right. Now. So what I do is a large number of things. Like, so they don't want it, like, and then have it ways already a thing. Okay. So how do
That, what's popular.
That's what you guys
So what I was thinking is
Yeah, how do you do that inside of that?
oh yeah, we need to. Very easy.
So couldn't we have it, so we just have where you pick one array, and then the next one is just take it down.
You could do that, but I don't think we get for the formal.
So couldn't we do a formula for activities, just count them? Definitely have to be right.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to be. What happened?
I do, but we don't know the end, so we have to. That's the problem. We're like, no. Like, that's not. Hanging him out and keep when you're like, oh, here's where. And then, it has to be, yeah, it must be counter is so what I'm doing is I am making a Fibonacci.
Yeah.
So what I'm doing is and so I'm adding counter
Is it counter plus counter? Is counter plus plus or counter? We could do counter plus counter. So.
No, the counter is 1 plus 1. Oh, yeah, that's wrong. You're right.
I mean, I think there's a shortcut too, but some people.
It would be, we would do this. What was your question?
She's creating a variable with a counter for like number.
I'm trying to make it I mean, we could do this 2 ways. One person.
Steps, but I don't know. But I think like necessarily has to happen.
Is there a way of starting with this now?
Yeah, yeah, it's actually, it's oh, equals, so.
Or just-
Yeah, so, right now, I'm trying to make Fibonacci, somebody want to do it right.
So basically.
Yeah. It's time to be.
This one.
So, this was right. So we could
So let's You're right.
And then when we started 20, or like when we started a more difficult
How are you?
Good. I'm trying to test the areas.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, so this is three. And then so I come back again.
Do we need to count plus one?
Yeah, because I'm trying to do This plus this.
How do you want
So I got this part.
Hey, that's fine.
I think excellent. This is 3, but then we
Are thinking it's each number.
Oh, yeah.
One.
On the previous one.
And if it's all visible and you can wait, no,
For now, I would buy
Should be right.
I know, so now
just output the true or false. So you like yes, there.
like, I don't want to.
Oh, yeah, but what if it
You guys have no track day. Just be able to do it.
So, okay, so that's, I can't use the it's just. I was trying to just bring.
The number one.
Maybe it's the next round.
So, why is it?
Right.
Position one, actually, two.
Sorry. I want to add, like, you said, when you want to do it,
Yeah, so you can.
so start there.
Now I'm less confident.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're gonna have to do that first.
Yeah.
Then you're gonna go through that and figure out even ones are.
Okay.
So Fibonacci sequence up to a certain number,
Say again?
up to a certain number.
Yes, exactly.
You can start with this one, right? And then you'll know because you already have values.
Yeah. Yeah, so.
This was.
You'll know
Does somebody know how to put it on eyes? Yeah, but it's not. That's not. They have to.
Yeah, we'll go. It's only the
So there's a remainder.
Oh, you're trying to.
Yeah.
This should might be.
What it works. Wait, where you should know.
Oh. Why does he from? He goes from. And it was.
I said, say somebody who's looking for the number applied by 2.
Yeah, no.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Why can't you say? Why can't I? I'll play with that and I can.
No,
The issue is that we don't know if this new number that starts off at.
that way you can go through.
You know, little wins. I'm excited about little wins.
Oh, wait, but.
Yeah, I don't. I'm not really. Or, I mean, I guess I get it from the purposes.
Yeah.
Sure.
Right.
We're gonna have to change it. So we maybe.
Yeah. Well, that doesn't make sense.
I'm writing on that like set.
How long is it? Oh, but it's not like. Oh. Now we need to add the rest of the. Oh, yeah, okay.
We overthinking this.
I guess we'll figure it out why.
Why the what?
So painting or coloring, or turn black.
I understand that.
It is mostly.
Here's a quick backstory. That.
It's
like the big stuff.
Break it out into a new line after every couple seasons. And then I think that'll just, at some point, it's just. You're
Well,
literally-
I've stuck at the whole stuff here, at least. Yeah, you know, at least. That's very well fair. But I mean, they're like 9 different. Like, so if 16 divides into it, then we know how much.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you're making it there.
Yeah.
Down space. So, but the-
I don't have I can't.
Oh, I'm sorry.
One and a half inches.
It's like.
Yeah, so that's Spanish.
So.
Yeah, so you're gonna do this.
Okay.
So they are.
Crazy.
You guys. We have.
Try it for just 10. Make sure that-
Like, well, what if we just tried it out for like what if we just tried like start from here? Or we'll take forever.
Yeah.
Wait, what, I'm sorry.
It doesn't work.
I was like, why is it not from, this is not the.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
It won't say. Well, we can say I'm very headed out.
It should at least print.
You can say or just.
Or, no, it should print. Oh, I know, because I know, yeah, No. Oh, okay. I know what you're saying. So what and then we're like I'm trying to ask values. So then when we do
Yeah.
values one, value two, there's nothing in two.
So.
There's nothing in four. I'm determining that this number X is divisible by then all the numbers in this number. So I'm just like
So I just listed out like why it's like.
How are you guys doing? Are you guys feeling close to done? How much more have you? 10 minutes.
No, I got to that. I thought I just-
11 has to like first.
And no
Makes
makes
sense to.
Should be.
Oh man, yeah. It's like learning a new language.
It's.
Yeah, then you go and learn a third programming language and all English.
If it's anything,
Do you guys think you're close to solving it? Okay.
I should like enter the so AI plus one is AI minus two plus one. So this is the way that I do this.
Well, you say you don't go for 11, right? Like,
So.
we get the number.
This is now the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
Sure.
And we're going to. Yes, we're just trying to make
We try. I just don't know how we incorporate.
Yeah. Well, I think that's some way you have to get it running
So it's just. Yeah.
They say here, looking at it from the other side.
So
Now
we
we
are
go.
doing
New.
I graduated to
Really?
0,
I
then
don't know if it's gotten any further, but.
and then you do J plus.
I'd say get it.
If it is
Yeah.
actually a
Example.
Yeah.
And then.
So you had to do. A little bit on the top part.
So let's try to turn this going a little bit like module 0.
Wow.
So J starts at 0.
So it's make sure.
I'm sorry. Can we do all three of them less than?
Yeah, so is there a number?
That's my problem. Where's the, I'm on. Can we make J one? Even like sun is less than.
Can we not enter the rest of that?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm It always goes
Figure out something.
Did you figure it out?
I'll figure out something that's
London.
straight with it. Yeah.
Except that I know this bigger volume of.
No.
I come through it so. So updates and.
No.
Well.
Well, let's try that with
But then.
Oh, this is like this.
Oh,
you can do that, that's fine. This, I would start with the array. Start here for the.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense.
Right, yeah.
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 You're not listening to them.
I think that. You can
Yeah,
also.
we can
Oh, that's the way I did it originally. That's kind of like, that's what I did.
Yeah. No, that's right, that's right. That's how I remember.
Yeah.
So behind the person, you have it. So this is just the initial thing. Something like that. But the variable is 0. Yeah, I'm trying to say if there's no remaining. Yeah, so I yeah.
So, we don't need it because once this condition is we're going to change it as
What's some kind of
which is by default. And then you're going to be so running this while this is so while
Is there a group that solves their problem?
we solve it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So we solved it.
So I
Using like the group.
I think that number shouldn't be
Or
like
failing
just
Yeah.
giant.
I was responsible to build your first one, and build your second one. And your console log, wherever the focus next to console log, and then just see, here's running.
Yeah.
So,
So.
Make sure you mark it. I always forget those.
did you say?
Outside of this. Oh, like right from. Yeah.
Yeah, so it always will be all first.
One minute zero.
All right, you guys. So we've been working on this for about 45 minutes. We are going to stop, take a break, and then come back and talk about functions. If you want to keep working on it, if you feel like you're really close, by all means, feel free.
We're gonna go right into
No, we're going to move on to functions.
Is there a way for getting these right answers?
This was for you, not for you. Sorry?
Is there a way to?
I will have to make sure that I have solutions and post them. If I don't have solutions, I'll write so, general advice when solving problems like this. First thing I would do is, if there's an example given, solve for the example first. So rather than starting to jump and try and solve for 4 million or for 1 to 20, solve for 1 to 10 or whatever the value was here, 10. And then you'll know it works. And then try and write it in such a way that you can just swap out the number. So if you're doing this one, you can just swap in the number 4 million once you have it working for the example, and then you'll know it works. The other thing I would say is there's a like a saying or whatever in development, which is make it work, then make it right. So if you can think of a method that's not great, but will get it working and show that you can get a solution, then do that first. And then do what's called refactoring, which is editing your code to make it work better, to make it look better. And then the other piece of advice I would have is try and break it down into really ridiculously small tasks. So rather than trying to get this instantly working for 1 to 10, get 2 for loops working inside of each other and just console logging the indexes of those 2 for loops. Just to make sure that your 2 for loops are working. And then start building up on that. Cool. So go take a break, 10 minutes. Really important that you go take a break. I know you're glued to your problems, but go take a break so you can give your mind some relaxation. Yeah. Nobody's gonna do it. Okay. Did you have a question? Oh, you got it? Yes. Now you have to explain to your teammates.
Okay.
Sorry.
When does it stop?
This part.
Way up.
Okay,
That's
now.
the 3.
Oh, and there's, so like it. Did you see the copy of this? No, I didn't.
And then I just created a search for saying that I plus 1, that the word I plus 1. Yeah. Whatever you guys have it. True and so in some of them all, I would do confidence in the right. Sorry. Okay. So now we say that's a number.
And those are all not things.
Yeah, those are all couples.
So this is the code that you see that in everything. So it's variable x equals 0. Now we're testing. X is less than very much.
If you could set up the numbers, like 3 minus 1, so then yeah, but if you just like
So right, yes.
right, unless
Say modulo 2.
So what I'm doing right now is
And what I do is console log sequence. What we really want to do is summarize that. So we want to summarize the
I'm in the ball here, it's summarize and much more.
So what I do here is like when this will actually generate.
That's what
I think we must have built it to like pick out that.
You guys didn't take a break. Go take a break. I need it. Okay, don't take a break. Nobody take a break. You're not allowed to take breaks. Is what? Yeah. Well, yeah, we're gonna be talking for a long time. We're gonna be talking about a lot. So it's just good to take breaks. It's good for your mind. Keep yourself refreshed. You'll learn more of it.
No one seems to be interested.
Yeah, man. What it was the problem is just too good. People are like too into it.
To be honest, I looked at this for a long time. I've got a job in Headway, and right here, we're doing the same thing in Cotton Headway, so I'm there. With this good value stuff.
There you go.
Right, yeah. I just want the answer.
What?
I just want the answer.
Well, you're gonna have to sit there and code it if you want the answer. That's how it works. That's the only way it works.
I don't ever know what the summer, even numbers, would be 4 million.
You're missing out. You don't even know what you're missing out on, too.
I can just go to the bottom here.
How did I what?
The console, you just like way out.
Yeah, how do I get
Jump to the bottom. Like shortcut.
Control L will clear the console. Yeah.
Oh, this is gonna put it in. Oh, so I'm trying to get this out. Mine is fill it up and put it in. It's funny. I would say, why do we stop and then Right, so everything is ready. So check it out. Check it. And if it does, then you
It's gonna stop. After day. No longer less than like somewhere. I don't understand why it's taking so long.
End up like Bill.
Now everybody takes a break.
I don't have it in the way, I don't, I can put it in, you have to put those numbers in there, and I. Okay. Yeah. I'm ready. So I did it.
Right now, right now, we're just right now. 6. Are we gonna go?
I'll post solutions.
Create elements of this between, right? And some.
Yeah, that's not. Probably you're not going
Reinforcing it.
All right, good job, everybody. Okay, we're moving on. So today we're going to talk about functions. And if we look back, we've learned how to work with data in our programs, numbers, strings, booleans. And we've learned through control flow how to craft our program so that it will respond to that data conditionally. What we are missing is a way to encapsulate our code in such a way that we can reuse it or invoke it under certain circumstances. So we'll have some data, our program will respond to that data, and in doing so, we'll call an action. That action will affect our data, which in turn will cause our program to respond to it and call another action. And in so doing, we'll have a full application. That's what functions give us. It's code that does something. So in the course, here we are. This is our second to last lesson in this first third of the course, the first section of the third. Next class, we'll be talking about objects, and then after that, we'll have our lab. Cool. So functions. There's two parts to working with functions that we need to know. The first is declaring the function, and the second is invoking. This is what it looks like to declare a function. By now, the syntax is maybe looking a little familiar, right? If we compare this to an if statement or a for loop or a while loop, we've got our keyword. In this case, we've got our reference. This is how we're going to be able to reference our function before. We're going to put these curly braces or these parentheses here to denote that it's a function. And then we're going to open up a block of code, just like in if loops and for loops, or if statements and for loops. And then we're going to put the code that we want to run. So this is the anatomy of declaring a function, that first part. The next part is invoking a function, which looks like this. We're going to get it by its reference, just like variables. But in this case, we're going to call it, which we do with these parentheses. If we don't have the parentheses there, then we have a reference to our function, which is very similar to a variable. Variable is a reference to a value. We want to run the code that's stored in that function, which we do with these parentheses. So it's important to have those if we want our code to actually run. Cool. So just like last time, I've got a functions.js file on my exercises folder. We'll work through this as we go through the lesson. The instructions on how to use it are the same, and we'll work through it together. And then break off and work on some exercises that I'm also doing. All right? I'll give everybody a minute to get all the stuff open. Or sneak back to work, problem from before. But also open this. Okay. So we're going to scroll down to this one. We're going to declare this function, and then we're going to call it. So I'm going to uncomment lines 24 to 26, and then line 29. Save this file. Pop back to the terminal. Node. Oops. So it worked. But it looks like it also console logged some stuff way down here that I forgot to comment out. There it is. Sorry. So if you scroll down, lines 169 to 173, and then 184 all the way down to the end of the file. You just comment those out. If you're using Atom, and I think it's the same with Sublime, if you select a bunch of lines of text and hit Command/, it will automatically comment all those lines of text. I don't know if I told you guys that. I'm shortkey already.
Wait, sorry, you want this, but commented out or?
Commented out at the very bottom of the file. There's a bunch of code that's not commented out.
So everything should be commented out.
Everything should be commented out. Cool.
And then we're going back to the top.
Yep, and then we're going back to the top. Cool. So if I run this again, we get our one. This is my first function. Cool. See, I wasn't lying, you guys, it works.
So what's supposed to still be?
If you go to the very bottom of functions.js, there's a bunch of code that's uncommented. You just need to comment it out. Otherwise, it will also run every time you run this function.
What is it called when you like reference function without
Referencing. Referencing a function. That's what it's
It doesn't
called.
do anything.
So we'll get into this a little bit later. It's a reference to a function. So it doesn't perform that function or it doesn't execute that function. But as we'll learn later, functions are kind of like a data type, and so we can pass them to another function, and then that function can run. And we do that with a reference.
Okay, but still with that reference, you have to pass in like.
No, with that reference, we do not. Yeah, which we'll talk about later. The key point is when you want it to run, you have to include those parentheses. All right. So everybody's here? Yes? Yeah. Maybe? Yes? Okay. So if I keep that function, my first function, uncommented, and if I just reference, to your point, just reference it, and then run this file, I'll get nothing back. And that's because when I'm referencing a function, I'm not actually invoking it. It's these parentheses that tell the JavaScript runtime that I actually want to perform that function or invoke it.
And invoking is the same as calling.
Yep. Invoking, calling, executing, etc. With the parentheses, I'll actually get whatever code I have in my function to run. Cool. So let's go ahead and do the exercise that I prepared for everybody. It's 01. Y'all are going to write your own functions and then run them. So everybody's opening up o1_exercise.js. How are we doing? Has everybody finished this first one? Yeah? Has everybody finished this first one? All right. We'll do another maybe five or so minutes. Okay. Who would like to help me with question number 1? Write a function that console logs hello world and call it. How do I write a function? I've forgotten. What's that? Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Maybe I will. Does somebody want to volunteer? Otherwise. This is rigged. Do you want to just volunteer, Chris?
Sure.
You're going to volunteer?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Sweet. How do I write a function that will console log hello world?
Function. Function the hero.
Sorry?
Function the hero.
The hero, like that? All right.
And then the curly parentheses, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
So they have to be on.
I don't think so.
And then squiggly thing, and then console log, and then hello world.
Done. Oh, wait. Are we not done?
Yeah, call it.
Oh, yeah.
Just
Like that? Yeah. Nailed it. Is that like what everybody had? Oh, wrong file. There we go. Hello, world. Good job. Okay. Who wants to help me with the second one? Yes. Go for it.
Just said bar,
Bar, interesting.
my number
My number.
equals 13.
Okay, all right. That's all you did?
Well,
All right, sassy pants. Step 2.
that's 3 now, right? Next is declare a variable called my number. That's not a number, right?
Yeah, there you go. Now do line 21
That
now.
would be 3.
How do I write a function?
Me too. I didn't get it. I got, yeah, the next one I actually only had the function add 1. But I hadn't finished defining that.
Okay. Well, what else do I do?
Parentheses,
Yep.
and then squiggly.
Yep.
So I guess this would be like, I haven't tried to do the function before, but I was gonna guess it would be like my number plus 1.
Sarah, how do I do the next one to subtract one?
Oh, okay, so same thing, bear in mind number. Oh, we're just doing function.
Yep.
Function subtract 1. Then same.
Oh. Cool. Am I done? This whole thing is problem 2. Am I done? What do I have to do left? Random student. Use them both a few times. Okay. How do I use them? Sit on. How do I use them?
Add 1 friends.
That's a few times.
I mean, you have to get to a few times.
Yeah, let's see that. Where are we gonna be?
I don't think that's good anymore. Most cool themselves.
Well, we like to live dangerously here in Introduction to JavaScript. All right. And for good measure, we'll do this. Great. And now I'm gonna console.log my number, right? Right. Right. Oh man, now I gotta scroll up through all this stuff.
No, that's actually right.
Oh, function add 1, my number. What's that?
Yeah, console log.
I did down here at the bottom.
Oh wait, if we're doing it, we've been doing it once plus number and then once minus the number. What do we get?
I tried to add more than I was, but yeah, let's test that out. Add 1. Interesting. What's going on? Oh, yeah. Sorry. So we want either my number is equal to, or we want my number plus plus, or we want my number minus minus. That's right. Okay.
Great.
So we were adding that number, but we weren't doing anything with it. So yeah, that should work. Oops. Yep, it worked. So we were adding 1 to my number here, but then nothing was happening to that. We weren't doing anything to it. So what we needed to do was to save it back into this variable, or to otherwise like overall change the value that was stored in this variable, which was the step that we were missing.
And what is my number plus plus right now long for?
Sure. It's the same as my number is equal to my number plus 1. So that's the step that we're missing for that.
What's the intermediate way of writing it, where it's like my number plus equals 1.
Yep, that's another way of doing it. So we could have done that too. So it would be plus equals 1, something like that.
So it automatically logs. The function will automatically log it. Or display it.
No, it was running that, but it wasn't doing anything. We're console logging it.
Oh, okay.
Otherwise, the value of my number would be changed down here, but then our program would end and we would have done nothing with that number. So, okay, cool. Great job, you guys. Okay, so moving on. I have great news, and that's that we have all been hired to build out an application for the Texas Instrument Company. They need somebody to build a new calculator. And they asked us to do it. They were so impressed with all your coding abilities that they couldn't even think about anybody else that they would want to hire. So we're going to build out a calculator. And to do it, we're going to sit here and we're going to write a function called add1. And then we're going to write another function called add2. And then we're going to write another function called add3. And actually, I'll take care of that, but I need somebody else to write subtract1 and another function called subtract2 and another function called subtract3, etc. Does that sound good? That doesn't sound like a good way of writing our new calculator? No, that sounds terrible. That sounds so terrible. We're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to use something called parameters, arguments. Parameters are ways for us to pass values into functions and then have our function perform some action on that data and then give us a result. Parameters are the part where we're passing that data in. So instead of sitting here and writing add1, add2, add3, all these different functions, we can write a function that just adds two numbers together and then gives us the result of that back. That's much more useful, much better use of our time. And we're going to be able to finish this contract with Texas Instruments so fast that we're going to have a ton of money left over in the budget, and we're all going to be able to like move to the Bahamas or something. It's going to be great. So how do parameters work? So we're going to declare a function called say hello. It's going to console.log. Actually, no, we're going to write a function it's called say thanks. Say console.logs thanks. The parameter is going to go right here in between our parentheses. So in this case, we're going to pass a name right here. This is not a variable. This is a parameter. And those are different. But it is effectively like a variable once we're inside our function. Because here, I can reference that value just like that by its name. Right? Now, if I call this, we'll get thanks, Obama, afterwards. Oops. Oops, we're on the right file. There we go. Thanks, Obama. We can change this up. We can, instead of Obama, we can do thanks, Zach. We can do thanks, Chris, for answering all these questions when you get randomly picked. And we get all three of those back. So this parameter works like a placeholder for whatever value we're passing in here. All right. Do we think that there's a limit on the number of parameters that I can pass into a function? Who thinks that there is? Yeah, there's not. I mean, there probably is. but it's enormous, and it's determined by probably the memory on your computer or something like that. And you're not going to sit here and type all those out. No. So that means that we can be very expressive in how we write our functions. So instead of doing something like this, we're just going to take a number and add 1 to it. We can do something like this, which is going to take 2 numbers and add them together and give that back to us. Does that make sense? All right. Okay. Exercise 2 here is working with parameters. Why don't I give you guys maybe 10 minutes to hack away at it, and then we'll come back and we'll do it together.
Can you go back to the functions?
No, that's giving you the answer. You have to remember or take notes.
10,000 points, I think.
Oh, sorry.
I know you also have that function, JS file.
That is correct. Okay, good. I'll know if you look through your Git history.
Is it better to log it like in the function or call console.log?
You're gonna have to do it within the function because we haven't talked about return values yet. What's that?
We accidentally added a random person to our Slack group when we were sending the warm up. And for some reason, like, we all keep replying back to that thread. It's other random person.
In this class?
I don't know.
Is there a Philip on?
Yeah. It's in the back.
Oh,
That's why we made a mistake.
Oh, that was the confusing. Okay, Philip, that's right. Oh, that's super funny. Philip works for GA. He's the instructor coach.
This is spam again.
Like everyone on the GA account?
Sorry?
Like, so we have access to like everyone here?
Oh no, just people who've accessed or like been added to the class. Yeah. That's pretty funny. Hope you got a point across. How are we doing? It's been about 5 minutes. We're about halfway through time. Are we doing? We doing well? Okay.
to use the console inside the function.
Why is this happening? Is it trying to do the math of all these three things? And I just need to do something like this. Oh, sorry. I see it's trying to add this and that's the number. And if I break it up.
Yeah, so it's a plus like here.
Is that how you add in console?
Well,
I mean,
we want to add.
Yeah.
We want to subtract these two. That's why we use a comma.
And can I do that in general? With console? What is the comma do?
It's just the way the comma separate. Just like in our example string.
With the plus sign.
Just a comma.
So,
So our string.
so in general, rule, I do
Lots of
that makes more sense. Yeah, that makes more sense. I'm like, okay. So then adding it is doing a plus sign in between specific variables is it's literally trying to add it together.
Yeah.
Ah, yeah, that's good to know. Should I get
Okay, how are we doing now? Good? So good. So good. All right. Okay, so let's see who's going to help me out with this one. Hold on. All right. Create a function called add numbers that takes two parameters and console logs the results of adding these two parameters together. Go.
You start with the function first. And then add numbers. From 1, comma, 2. Oh, we're at the same.
Oh, yeah.
From 1, comma, 2.
Okay.
Curly brackets.
Okay.
And then console log. And then 1 plus 2.
But we're good, right, for now? Let's check to make sure it works. So add numbers. What's a good number? 10 and 11. Are those your favorite numbers? No. What are your favorite numbers? Oh. Not from like your lucky soccer jersey when you were a kid or anything like that?
I always had number 1.
Oh, yeah. All right. That'll do it. Wait, is that the right file? Yeah. 10, 11, 21. Boom. It worked! Congratulations! Okay. Who's going to help me next? 20.
Alright, so we want the same thing. Functions, subtract numbers. Add some parameters. Number 1 minus.
Perfect. Do you have favorite numbers that we can subtract?
Well,
Do you have one favorite number? Because I have one favorite number.
11.
Okay. There we go. Ta-da! Good job. Yeah. Question?
So here where num1 and num2 doesn't get overwritten or anything, there's no connection between the nums.
Yeah.
per function.
So we can think of these kind of like variables, but they're really more of placeholders. So yeah, they're holding a place for whatever values we end up passing through. So when this function gets run, num1 is equal to 11, almost like we've gone var num1 equals 11. And then num2 is equal to 5, almost like we've gone var num2 equals 5. And then we'll perform our operation on those as if they were variables. The important thing is these are going to reference this number in the same way that a variable might reference that number. Does that make sense? It's a really good question. How do we feel about parameters? Yeah.
I have questions about the way people reference, the way I see functions reference.
Okay.
And, like, for example, I've seen a function reference equals and then components put afterwards. Is that the same way as?
Oh, we'll talk about that later in the class.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Yes.
Can I ask you to hold this? Okay.
Oh no, yeah, that's fine. Answer it later.
All right. Yeah. We'll answer. Okay. Cool. So overall, how do we feel about parameters? Pretty good.
So, sorry, really quick, in this one, we could have done something totally different in the second function, and then as long as we put what we call the functions and what we want to put in there, it'll still.
Yeah, we could have called these anything. X and Y, beep and boop.
And we could have
Do
done
a
something
bar.
with a string too.
Yeah, I mean, we could pass in a string here too and see what happens. But yeah, this could not be a string here where we're declaring a function. This has to be a value reference, just like a variable.
Can a parameter be a variable?
Yeah, here we could save a variable out here called var my favorite number and pass that in here. Absolutely. Parameters can be anything, and as we'll see later, we can even pass in functions into a function as a parameter, and then call it inside of our function.
Inception.
That's right.
Yeah, funcception. Oh man, that's gonna be the name of our new funk band. Funcception. Man. Dibs. Anyway. I'm actually super excited about that. What was I gonna say? Okay, so do you guys see how functions are super powerful? In that we can write some code that performs some action, and then perform that action on pretty much any data, as long as it meets what the function expects. Right? Like we can pass any numbers here, and we'll get those two values subtracted from each other back. Right? Yeah. Yeah, so this is what makes functions so powerful. Is one, the ability to encapsulate some block of code and reuse it, and then being able to construct our function in such a way that we can pass it pretty much any data and then get the same result back. But wait, we have to console log this in here, right? We can't console log it out here outside of our function. Like what if we wanted to take the value that this function creates and save it to a variable? Oh man, I don't think there's any way to do that. What are we gonna do?
Could you just call it? No.
Could you create a variable and then assign a variable outside
Yeah.
and then assign that sum or
In there?
minus in there and then call it out there?
We absolutely can do that, and we've done that I think a couple times already today. That's called a side effect.
Is that bad?
Generally, and we'll talk about why when we talk about functional programming. What we want to do is return a value from this command. So if we come back here, we can return a value from a function, and we do that with the return keyword. So here I have a function, just like our add function from before. It takes two numbers and adds them together. But instead of console logging them, I'm going to return them here using the return keyword. Then when I call my function down here on line 76, I can pass in some numbers and assign. Am I assigning this function to this variable?
Yeah.
It looks like that.
Assigning the value.
Yeah, whatever gets returned from this function is going to be stored in this my_num variable. Right? Yeah. Well, let's run it and find out. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. We want node functions. 15. 5 plus 10 is 15. Yeah. Yeah. So JavaScript is going to execute this function. We're going to return the value of these two numbers added together inside our function. So this is going to get evaluated, in this case, to the number 15. And then the number 15 is going to get stored into our variable. Oh, man. Yeah.
But it would have to be, that's the next executable line of code or something like that. Would that number make any sense for minor?
Here? So,
Its chronology.
yeah, we have to do it like this. If we were to do this up here, whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. Then we'd have a problem. Because this would still evaluate to 15, but then nothing would happen because we're not doing anything with it. This way, this function is going to get run and evaluate to 15. And then that number 15 is going to get stored into our variable. Does that answer your question?
So when it says return, it means store that number for use.
No. So when it means return, it means send this back out of the function. This is our input. These parameters are our input. By using return, we're designating our output of our function. So we don't need to store this to a variable. If we wanted to, what we could do was this. Just like that. And we would console log 15. Five and 10 are our input. We're going to add those together, and the value of those two added together is going to be our output, which we designate with the return keyword. Does that answer your question?
No, this doesn't really make sense to me.
Okay. Let's try the exercise and let's see if that helps.
Is the point so that you can then do stuff with my number?
Exactly. So we've got our calculator. We've got some number stored in a variable, right? Var initial number, set it equal to 0. And then what we want to do is the user clicks add 5. So we're going to do var initial number is equal to initial number, comma 5. And then down here, doing a log initial number. Right? When you think of like your calculator, it always starts at 0, and then you hit plus key, and then you hit 10. In this case, sorry, I think I said 5 before. This is kind of like what's happening behind the scenes. So now if I run this, actually, let's do this. So we're logging it before and after. And I get 0 and 10.
So return is required if you want to use it outside.
Yeah.
Is that the-
Yeah. Cool. Okay. So let's see. We did what? Exercise 3, 2. We're on exercise 3 now, right? Okay, this one's a doozy. I'm gonna give you guys 15 minutes for it. Yes, both of them, please.
Zach? Yeah. Is there a way, from Sublime to be able to, relation back functions back? I know that when somebody uses square. Or is there a way that, like what it has? Sublime text. Got one.
It's like.
It's just.
That's not, square, that's two.
Okay, raise your hand if you are finished with the first one. Cool. All right. Raise your hand if you're finished with the second one. Okay. Hurry up, Sarah.
The distance formula.
What is the distance formula again? Oh man, I don't know. Let me pull it up. What was it? It was control flow. Let me get that one. No, it was data types. Yeah. Just post it in Slack.
If I call the variables the same thing, the two functions, does that matter?
If I call, as the parameters the same?
No. Like if I call them variables, then passing in the values to answer won't matter. Oh, sorry. So,
All right, guys, let's come back together. Let's do this first one. Would anybody like to volunteer before I pick a random student? Okay, great. Okay, number one, write a function called average that calculates and returns the average of two numbers passed in as parameters.
Okay, so start by declaring a function called average.
Okay, how do I declare a function?
Function. Average. And then I call mine num1 and num2.
Num1, num2, perfect.
And then square brackets. And then return. And then I did parentheses num1 plus num2. And then divided by 2 on the opposite side.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
And then bar answer equals average, and then passed in 20, 30, comma 30.
Oops, yeah, there we go. 30.
And then also log.
Great. Is that gonna work? Yeah, it should work. No, we're not doing functions. Node of 25. Yep, that works. Cool. Great job. Does anybody want to volunteer for the next one? Maybe we can do it in multiple parts. All right. Oh, we forgot to do a drum roll for it. Wait, let's do another drum roll. There we go.
So I did it, I don't know if I did it correctly. I called the function and I wrote function, and then I called it distance function, but you can call it whatever you want.
Okay, let's just call it distance. How about that?
And then I put in 4 parameters.
Oh, interesting. Let's do it this way. So we're taking 2 arrays.
Oh, oops. Okay. So then,
Sorry. No, go for it. Take it over.
okay. So, okay. So, no, I can't. I have to start looking it up to convert the.
Oh, let's see. I posted it in Slack. So the array is going to have 2 numbers in it.
Yeah.
The first one is going to be X. The second one is going to be Y.
Okay, so I did it in one line. I figured it out.
Okay.
So I did math.square or SQRT,
Okay.
parentheses, math.how, parentheses. Inside there, I did 0.1, and so we could do square bracket 0, and then I did minus 0.1 square bracket 1.
Okay.
And then I did comma 2, because what I'm doing is taking the 2 points and taking it to the power of 2. And then the next portion is math pow. I did plus.
Okay. So plus, yeah.
Then I did math pow parentheses 0.2 square bracket 0 minus 0.2 square bracket 1. Then I did next outside of that parentheses again.
Is that it?
Yes. But then I put that in the return.
Oh, yeah. Like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then outside of that, it's the same, or actually no, it's a little different. I guess I have to create 2 arrays.
Yeah, so we're gonna do this the same, right? So distance, and
Okay,
then we're gonna pass two arrays here.
so would I need to just put the value of names and create names for the array?
We can just pass them in right here, just like this.
So then the described did 0, 0. And then my next array was 3, 7. And then I did console long distance. Answer.
Just like that.
Yes.
Great.
Uh-oh, we're missing,
Oh, that's so ugly.
we're missing parentheses somewhere.
I love the point and the point.
Oh, oops, it's because I can't spell. Is that the answer that you got?
Okay. Yes, I did.
All right, cool.
Can you talk about that in a bit more detail, just going through this really quickly?
Yeah, anything in particular, or?
I more don't totally understand what you're doing in the square brackets in the return.
Here, this long one-liner.
Yeah, is that like something about like the index of where you are in that, or like?
Oh, yeah, so this is the index within the array.
And how
So-
can you do that, and where do you do that, and also how does it know that there's only gonna be 2 values?
So we're kind of saying it, right? If we were writing like a robust program that we were going to ship into production, we would probably do what's tests. We would run tests. So here we would have if type of point 1 does not equal object. It's weird because in JavaScript arrays are a type of object. So if it's not equal to that, then we'd probably return and maybe throw an error or something like that. But here we're just saying, sort of implicitly, that it's only going to have 0 and 1. So 2. It's going to be a length of 2.
And then, sorry, and then within this in the return, we're doing comma 2, and that's doing something.
Yeah, so that's doing to the power of 2. So let's break this up. Let's do var part 1, I guess, is equal to this. I said part 1, but I don't know what you would call this. Oh, and I meant to not grab that far. Not that far. There we go. Alyssa, maybe you can help. Did you find this formula somewhere? Is there other parts for this? This is slightly different from the one that we used in class. Right?
No, I searched for how to create a power, and then I searched for how to create how to get square root.
Oh,
And then I saw in your, you said subtract x2 from x1, so I did that in the middle. So when you put on Slack, I did. So subtract x2 from x1 to get.
There we go, yeah. So here we're getting delta x. So var delta y.
Yeah.
It's going to be equal to this. Right? And then we can do var delta x squared is equal to this. And delta y squared is this. And then we're going to add delta x squared plus delta y squared.
You've answered twice.
So Alyssa's way was all condensed into one line, but we don't have to do it like that if we don't want to. We can break it out like this, and that's fine. The formula for the distance is we're going to take point x, which here we've called point 1, and we're going to subtract x1 from x2. So I think that this should actually be point 2, and this should be point 1. So here this is O, here this is 1. This is our first point, it has an x and a y. This is our second point, it has an x and a y. In our array here, the first number is x, the second number is y. So this is basically getting saved here, where this is a placeholder for whatever value we pass in first to our formula. So in this case, we're passing in an array. So 0.1 inside our function is equal to an array, specifically the array with values 0, 0. Since it's an array, we can access the values within it using the square bracket notation that we mentioned or that we learned about back when we covered arrays. So here we've got our first point. The x value is the first number in our array, which we access with the 0 index. We have our second point, which has an x value in it, as the first value in it, which we access with that 0. This just like we do with 0.1. We're going to subtract those numbers from each other and assign them to a variable. Delta x, delta stands for the difference in mathematics. So here we have the difference between two x values in our 2 points. And here we have the difference between the two y values in our 2 points. We're going to square both of those and then take the square root of that total of adding those two together. And then that's going to give us the distance between them on a Cartesian plane.
Can I please run that?
Yeah, mine looks like that, but it didn't.
Yeah.
Can you run that? Yeah, I just want to make sure that I have it right.
Yeah.
Did you put the same number before?
I'm sorry?
Did you put the same?
Yeah, we got 4 earlier.
Yeah, we got 4 earlier because we were subtracting x from y before. Now we're subtracting x1 from x2. Great points. Yeah, question.
So I didn't, I'm sorry if this was just mentioned, but I never used indexes in mine. I just,
Did you pass in 4 points or 4 parameters?
yeah.
That's fine. That's all.
Got it.
But what you did is fine. Okay, cool. Great job, you guys. So that's that. We are done with everything that we're going to talk about as far as, well, like learning how to use functions, how to write functions, how to pass the parameters, how to return values. This kind of covers all of the basics. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back and talk about scope. And then we're going to have a short section on using functions today. And then we're going to talk about functional programming, which is a paradigm within JavaScript.
Are you gonna talk about side effects?
Yeah, when we talk about functional programming.
Okay.
Cool. So 10 minutes. Take a break. It's very important that you go get one of these vintage seltzer waters or a Diet Coke or something. Make yourself a PB&J. Ask me any questions because I'll be standing here.
Is your birthday program thing on the
My birthday program. What's the birthday?
your
Oh, for my
birthday
heart.
card?
It is, but it's I have it like private. I can make it public. Take a look at it. Are you gonna steal it?
I mean, with, they're all be credited, yeah.
I don't know. So I've got it's me and a friend.
Not sure.
I don't know. So I want to because it's like not. It wasn't hard to throw together. But a friend of mine and I were talking over the weekend, and we were like trying to come up with ideas for other things we could do with it. And we had a couple, but we didn't really land on one. But one was like you could do that for like senator or like prominent politician, maybe Donald Trump, for their birthday. I don't know when's Donald Trump's birthday.
That would be insane.
I think that'd be so funny. Yeah, it absolutely is. You'd have to like back it up, like do like all sorts of crazy caching, like just a ton of crazy stuff. But there's an API called Lob, the company, and they do they have an API, but they will do direct like snail mail. So we just like hook it up with that, and so that when you do it, like it's expensive, so people would have to pay to like mail their card to the White House for Donald Trump's birthday. But I think it would be so
How
good.
much does it cost to send a postcard?
I don't know. I bet you it's like 50 cents or so.
Oh.
Yeah,
People would do that.
I think people would do it. Yeah.
Can you pull up to a free?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I'll
So-
spam that out.
Yes.
Definitely do that.
Everybody just like totally spin it out. I think it'd be so good.
Because they have like Vandal, they would be like a.
Yeah.
You should be able to like print other people's cards too.
Yes. Like resend other people's
Yeah.
cards. That would be really funny.
Just have like a GoFundMe and just like,
Yeah, just like
yeah.
send hundreds of thousands. I wonder what he would do.
He'd see one at least.
Yeah, he'd at least do one. Oh man. So yeah, that would be great. Maybe he'd tag me in it, then I'd get a shit ton of followers on Twitter. Not the kind that I want, but yeah, change my name. Go into hiding. Move to Canada. Yeah, man. So I did see a story last weekend about Canada is having like problems on their border with all these people trying to rush over the border illegally from the U.S. into Canada. It's like a big news there, like headline news. They're like, what are we going to do with all these illegal immigrants?
He said that they would have asylum, I think.
Oh, in Canada?
Yeah.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's super funny.
What do you get? Exactly.
Yeah.
How do you know, like, after I think back the push line so you just said I and then so
Yeah, so you have to do quizzes for things that I would code for future. And then for all my agreement.
and so you know, how much is I got 7 points something from 6 1 last.
So you're gonna do your homework, you're gonna spend it, you'll know that it works because of double check by going with this, going well, this is mine. Great.
I wanna edit his exact birthday card thing with my girlfriend's like picture in there. Send her out some friends. Yeah.
Yeah, how do you know which one to do?
Yeah, so it doesn't.
And change faces.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Or like a function called yeah, it's so simple. My first. That eyes, like you must have gone on your way.
Someone's trying to put it
Yeah, clearly. I have great vision.
That's huge to be like, I'm
So return. I mean, I guess if you're like, I mean, I could return really professional and you're trying to get the context on this. I'm just like, no, yeah, you know what it's making. I will not be changing. I did the sum of the 2 items, but I think if I could steal twice more, then I would. And I don't wanna add numbers twice. Oh, I know.
Maybe not like.
Right?
That hurts my eyes. Like, yeah, dude.
well, you know,
One and
I
two.
see.
It's fine. Wait, 1 and 2, 3 and 4.
Oh,
Yeah, that's all I'm doing. Okay, so there's our console. Maybe that's probably
wow.
big grass. Okay. No, some.
Now
Wow.
that something like
You know what, I'm here on Slack. It's kind of image.
Yeah, I can see All right, guys. Everybody. Cool. So how do we feel about functions so far? Fist of 5. Good. You know,
Passing 3 in.
you're what?
That's why I'm there.
That was a good one. Seems like you understand how functions work. Cool. So the next thing we're going to talk about is called scope. And it's, we'll come back to that. Scope is a little bit crazy, or can get a little crazy, and I think it can, often how you will read about it or hear it explained, it'll sound really confusing, but it's kind of intuitive, I think. I think people just haven't come up with, sorry?
Those are opposite sentences.
Yes, those are opposite.
Confusing, but it's intuitive.
Yeah, so I think it's intuitive if you don't try and make it crazy. So scope determines what is defined and what it's defined as. So a global scope is this file, the scope of this file. If I declare a variable, for instance, var a equals 1, this variable is declared within this scope of this functions.js file. Functions create scope. So I have a global scope here, and then if I create another function down here, I've created another scope, within global scope that is localized to this function. So 2 functions. Global scope, or 2 scopes, Global scope, and then the scope of this function. Everybody with me so far? Yeah, all right. Now, scope determines what values are defined and where. Var A1 is defined in global scope. I have another scope within global scope. Is A defined within my inner scope? What do you guys think? Let's take a guess. Who thinks it is? And who thinks it is not? Okay. So the answer is that it is. It is defined within our subscope here, within global scope. And we can see that by, let me just console log A. So we should get 1 back. And we get a bunch of other stuff back. There we go. And we obviously have to call this, because that's how functions work. There we go. And we get 1. So it is. So that's cool. So if I have a function, I can see out of my function in the global scope, right? Yeah, that works. So let's try this next example here. And actually, I think I have all the way down here. Not that one. Let's see my next example. So here I'm doing the same thing. Sort of. I have my global scope still, right? That's not going anywhere. And then I'm declaring a function and creating a scope within that function, right? Now I've declared a variable, var a equals 1, just like before. And then I'm going to console log it down here. Do we think this is going to work? Who thinks it is? Who thinks it's not? Yeah, it's not going to work. Reference error. A is not defined. Interesting. So why didn't my console log of A work? I didn't return it. Or where is A defined? Inside my function. If I had returned A, would I get the variable A back or 1? Yeah, I would have gotten 1 back. So even then, A would not have been defined. This would have still thrown an error. So up here, though, I was able to look up into global scope. Sorry?
Was it because it was already defined above?
A was defined in global scope up above. Here, A is defined within my local scope, the scope inside my function. And outside of that, i.e. up in global scope, I can't see it. Yeah.
Can you, I mean, so it seems like, you know, scope cascades downward.
Yeah.
But can you, like overwrite scope, overwrite a variable like locally inside a function and then not have it like interfere? If it was named the same, I don't know why we would do this theoretically speaking.
Yeah. Happens. This is why variable names are important.
Right, and if you overrode it inside a function, would it mess up the variable outside of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let's talk about it after we finish going through this. So the key takeaway here is that if I'm inside of the scope, I can look up, but if I'm outside of the scope, I can't look into it. Yeah.
I don't understand how you can get the value of A without running the function.
Oh, all right. That's right. So I didn't run my function, so maybe that's why A is not defined. Still get the same. So that's right. I didn't run this function, but even if I do, I get the same error. It doesn't. I should run the function, but that's not really why A is not defined. A is not defined because, as far as we're concerned out here up in global scope, there has been no variable A that has been declared or defined.
Global scope is not limited above, right? Like technically, it doesn't have to be above. It just stop getting the function, so you can declare below if you need it.
Are you talking about up or down in the file?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's getting us something called hoisting, which is kind of a pain and a little bit complicated, and we're not going to talk about it. But yeah, there are certain cases, for instance, where I could define and call this function below, like at the end of the file, and then console log A all the way up here, and I would still get the value that I expect. But we're not going to talk about that.
What's it called again?
Hoisting?
Hoisting.
Yeah, because JavaScript compiles the file twice, actually. So the first time it compiles it, it sets up all of our values, all our variables, and then the second time it compiles it, it actually runs it. But we're not going to get into that. So yeah, I can't look into a function and access anything within its scope. But from within a function, I can look up. Go for it.
So, slightly that's something that I meant to ask earlier. When we were in the last exercise, I didn't have math capitalized, so I couldn't get to run. What is a case sensitive?
Semi-randomly. It's just, yeah, it's, we'll see that a couple times throughout this course. JavaScript is case sensitive when it feels like being case sensitive. So you just have to learn when it's case sensitive. And a little bit, it's even inconsistent within keywords. In a couple classes, we're going to learn about Ajax, which we do with XML, HTTP request, HTTP request, or something like that. This is the name of the function. XML is an acronym, HTTP is an acronym. XML is all uppercase, HTTP is all lowercase. I don't know.
Thank you for answering that. Sorry for distracting.
No, that's fine.
In this file, what else do you have that's not commented out? Like above.
I don't think everything should be commented. Oh, I've got this running, or this not commented out, but it wasn't logging anything. Cool. So Phil, that brings us to your point. Can you remind us of your question again?
I don't remember what was the question. If the variable name
Is used again.
here
Yeah.
below, if it,
So here we're declaring a variable a up here. Let's set it equal to what is it, Phaedon?
Yep.
All right. So here we've got this variable a, which is fed on. And then inside our scope, we've got a equals 1. And we're calling our function. And down here, we're going to console log a. What do you guys think we're going to get back?
should get fed on.
Yeah, raise your hand if you think we're going to get fed on back. Raise your hand if you think we're going to get 1 back. Only one way to find out. Now, I'm moving this console log to within the function. Now, what do we think a is going to be? Do we think it's going to be fed on? Yeah. Remember when I said that scope was kind of intuitive? 1. And if I bring this up 1 line to before we declare var a equals 1. Oh, man. Yeah.
Wait, why is it undefined? You already defined it.
Not within our function. So,
And then cascade down into.
yeah, that's actually kind of weird. I would have expected fed on to come back.
Call something else maybe. It's a conflict.
Call these something else?
Whoa.
That worked. Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
that's exactly my question. What's around, so.
So my guess about what happened is that the first time it compiled the file, it saw that we were going to have this other variable down here, and so deleted the reference that it knew to the other one within that scope. But I don't know. That's like a weird, tricky question, like edge case for somebody who knows the JavaScript compiler really well. All right. There we go. Now I think we already know the answer to this, but do we expect this to work? I'm declaring my variable up here in global scope, and then console logging a within my function. If I remember to call my function this time. Oops. There we go. Do we think that this is going to be 1? Yeah, it should be. 1. All right. So how do we feel about scope so far? I started off by saying that it can be really confusing. I think the ways that it's often explained or taught can make it really confusing. But then I think it's kind of intuitive. Do you guys agree with me? Do you guys feel like it's kind of intuitive now? Sure. We ran into an edge case, but otherwise, yeah. Cool. So I have a super fun one for everybody. Okay. So here, I've got a nested function inside of a function that is being declared in global scope. How many scopes do I have here? 1? 2? 3? Yeah, I've got 3 scopes. The first one is global scope. The second one is the scope of my first function. And then the third one is the scope of internal function. So up here in global scope, I'm declaring var a is equal to 1. And then inside of my first function, I'm declaring var b is equal to 2. And then inside my internal function, I'm declaring var c is equal to 3. Right here on lines 145 and 146, what do we expect to get back when we console log a and b?
Nothing.
Nothing?
Function's not called.
Well, let's make sure the function is called down here. There we go. Now the function is being called. What do we expect to get back? 1 and 2? Does anybody think we won't get those back? Wait, let's see if maybe I'm doing this wrong.
Oh, because down.
Oh, it's going on. It's way down here. Wait, yeah, where is that? 164. Oh, okay, that's the error that we're getting down here. Let me comment some of this stuff out so that we can work in parts. Okay, so up here, we kind of already saw it already. So 1, 1, and 2. I think this 1 might be coming from up here. Yeah, it is. Okay. Now we're good. But we got 1 and 2. That's what everybody expected, right? So here, I'm opening up my other function, declaring var c is equal to 3, and then console logging a, b, and c.
So block out the console log about that.
No, we'll leave it. Do you want me to? Do we expect to get back 1, 2, and 3? Raise your hand if you do. Yep. Oh, because this function is all being called. Yep, and there it is. 1, 2, 3. All right. Now down here, I'm calling A, B, and C again, and they'll work just fine, right? Why not? Yeah, C is internal here. It should work though. We'll be fine. It's no big deal.
Oh, internal function is involved.
Yep, it is.
Oh, you do?
So yeah, that didn't work.
We need to call console log ABC again afterwards.
No, I think maybe this would be more helpful though, actually, now that I'm thinking about this. Come on. There we go. Var C. There we go. So I'm declaring these variables above and then assigning values to them below. So now when I run this, I should get 1, 2, 3. Let me make sure that the scale. It changes where the variable is declared. And yeah, it also changes the scope. Yeah. Okay. What I was hoping to do is try and force C to be undefined rather than throw an error. But we just have to limit this. Okay, the last one is all the way down here. Do we expect A to work? We're in global scope. Do we expect B to work?
Yeah.
Do we expect B to work? No. Do we expect C to work? We're in global scope right now.
Yeah. It's the, isn't it, wait.
So we're outside of this function, and we're outside of this function.
I'm sorry, I missed that you deleted the bar B and C.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, those are all undeclared. Great. So that's scope. This is obviously a somewhat like pedantic or contrived example. You're probably not going to be doing something like this, but it comes into play when you're building programs that use lots and lots of functions, or if you're ever nesting functions inside of other functions. which is pretty common, especially when you get into writing bigger functions. It will also come into play when we start working with multiple files, because each file will have its own scope, and we'll need to do something special to get functions or data that's in one file into another so that we can use it. Overall, Vista 5, how do we feel about scope as we've talked about it here? Yeah? Do you guys have any questions about scope?
Yes.
Okay.
I asked them. I don't feel it's because I don't get comfortable. I don't know what to ask, so.
Okay. You're welcome to slack me at any point with any question that you have.
So what happens when you declare bar, like, some a variable and then like not assign anything?
Then it will be undefined until we assign a value to it. So if we declare a variable up here in global scope, it becomes a global variable that we can access anywhere in our program. Which is why if we declare a variable, like we've declared A all the way up here, we can access A inside of this function and inside of this function. And we can even change its value inside of those functions, inside of those scopes. Cool. Okay. Oops. So 2 more things left to talk about, and the first is using functions, which will be pretty brief, and then we'll talk about functional programming, which I've provided a lot of optional reading on, as I'll do with object-oriented programming next class. But we'll give you an overview of like the core component of functional programming and what it is and why it'll help you. So using functions. Something that I think is often difficult to like really grok about JavaScript is that functions are an object. Any function that we call is an instance of the function object. So if I do node and I declare a function test, just like that. I call my test. I've got a function. If I do type of test, I get function back. This represents the function object, capital F function, just like a number is an instance of the capital N number object. What this means for us practically is that in many ways, any function we declare is a lot like a data type. So somebody, maybe it was Alyssa, raised the point, oh no, maybe it was Sarah actually, of creating a function and assigning it to a variable. That's fine. JavaScript doesn't care. We can do that. And it'll work more or less the same. So here, rather than function, my function, I've declared a variable, var my function, and I'm assigning it a function. That's great. Another thing I can do with a function, regardless of how I've declared it, is I can pass it into an array. So I can have an array of functions, and I can create a for loop, and then call those functions all in a row. We'll see when we talk about objects, we can also assign functions into an object, and they become methods of our object. We'll talk a bit about next class. Were you raising your hand because you have a question? No. Yeah.
When we assign the function to a variable, it means that we assign the return value of that function to that variable?
No. Though that's a very astute point. No, what we're doing here is we're assigning the function. This function, this whole function, is serving as a value almost. that our variable is referencing. Just like if we were to do var my number is equal to 1. It's essentially the same thing, but here we're getting a lot more because we're getting a whole function that itself has a lot of code group. Yeah.
If you were to say, if you were to put parameters in my function, and then you had parameters in the function itself, would it be passed in that way?
Yeah. So if I declare a function here, like with a variable, and I pass in parameters here, num1, num2, I can have access to those here.
But you can't return. But when you return a number, when you do a return inside of a function, that will.
I can do a return here as well. That will work just the same.
Oh, so it will go into the value of my function.
So it'll run whatever we have stored in our function. So we can return, let's return num1 plus num2. And then we will say this is a variable and console.log. Right? So we're creating this function that's going to add these two numbers together and saving it to a variable. And we're calling that function with 5 and 10 and assigning the output of that to a variable, a separate variable, and then console logging that variable.
Okay.
And it worked. Ta-da! So functions are values. Functions are values. We can even pass a function into another function, which I think I mentioned before. But let's do function by outer function. This is going to take a function to it, and it's going to return. Actually, let's use console log. And then down here, I'm going to create a function, my inner function, which is just going to return the string test. Then I'm going to do my outer function, and then my inner function. And let's see, this should work. And it did not. Why did it work? This function's not up. There we go. Press.
Oh, snap. Call the function
What?
without parentheses.
So wait, this goes back to the point that Lindsay made earlier. Am I calling the function right now?
No, it's a reference.
Yeah, it's a reference. So here I'm passing in a reference to a function into another function. And then that function is going to call that function, the outer function. So functionception. We're going to have an upright bass player.
Classic.
Yeah. So okay, func here is as a parameter is going to reference, reference whatever function I pass in and call it. So we're assuming that that's a function because I'm putting these parentheses here and I'm going to call it. Down here, I'm calling my outer function, right? And I'm passing it in a reference to this function, my inner function, that I just declared here. Yeah.
So if you had a parameter in inner function, would it throw an error including those parameters when if you were to try to do that with a parameter?
Like this, and then let's see. I think if I do this, I'll get an error. Okay. And then if I pass this into, I'm actually not sure off the top of my head. Let's find out. Yeah.
So you have to pass that value into the next function.
So what's happening here is this function is being called with these parentheses. And it's being, when it's being called, it gets a value. So what happens is the compiler is going to start here. It's going to call this function with 2, and then it's going to replace this value with the string test2. And then it's going to pass the string test2 into my outer function. So here we're trying to call a string, essentially. So what we need to do instead is this. And boom, it worked. Yeah. I don't want to dwell on this for too long because I do want to talk about functions. How do we feel about this? Maybe not this in particular. I don't expect you guys to be like building mazes of functions that you're calling within each other. But the idea of passing functions to another function, maybe storing functions in an array, does that feel good? Let's modify these slightly and do console.log 1 there. And we're going to call this first function, and we're going to call this second function. And we don't need these. And then what I'm going to do is create var array of functions is equal to right, and then I'm going to create a for loop. I have tab completions. Yeah. Highly recommend like spending some time on YouTube or whatever, figuring out what all the different shortcuts for Atom are, because you can just like blaze through writing code or editing code. So let's see. Do we think this is going to work? Raise your hand if you think it's going to work. Raise your hand if you think I'm an imposter, I'm a terrible coder, I have no idea what I'm talking about, and you think this is not going to work.
I don't think you're a terrible coder.
You just think it's not going to work? Am I making a mistake that you're not telling me about?
I don't understand why you need the parentheses around the square bracket, after the square bracket.
It's all about evaluation, right? So this is a reference. So we can reference that function, right?
So why would you put the parentheses inside of the array?
Because of sort of the order of operations. Function, my first function.
Oh, so you're creating the value.
So
and the
this-
value of that.
Array of functions is my array. Array of function I is the first item in this array. This is going to evaluate to this, which is just a function reference. So then I'm going to call
So you need to put the parentheses.
it. Yeah. This is almost like shorthand. I could say var my func is equal to that, and then my func, call it here. Maybe this is a little more clear. Overall, this is what's happening. Cool. Okay, so we're going to spend 10 minutes talking about functional programming. Has anybody ever heard of functional programming? No? What was what shortcut? Oh, up here? R, Command R. It's Command R, and then Command R I think goes within the file to any functions that you've got. Command P will go to any files that you have in your tree view. Cool guys. Dropping some knowledge about JavaScript here, but you know, Atom, it's cool. Anyway, cool. So functional programming is taken straight from mathematics. You start to think of programs in terms of units of a function, as in like a mathematical function. So something that takes in some input and generates some output. There are entire programming languages that are purely functional, like Haskell is one. So you can only ever write functions. And they all have to be pure, which we'll talk about. JavaScript is not one of those languages. JavaScript has what are called supersets, which is when someone says JavaScript is fine, but it needs all these other features. I'm going to write a version of JavaScript that is not really JavaScript. It has to be compiled into JavaScript. TypeScript is an example. Elm is a functional superscript of JavaScript. So it will enforce writing functional code in JavaScript. But more than anything, functional programming is just a paradigm that we've implemented in programming. So something like Elm will make it easier to write functional programs, but we can do it ourselves without all of that. This will make more sense when we talk about object-oriented programming, because that's the other really big paradigm in computer science and in JavaScript. But in functional programming, we take any task that our program is trying to solve, and we break it down into small, discrete subtasks. They can be performed at any point, and each individual subtask will always give us the same output, regardless of the input. And then the composition of all these tasks solves our problem. It gets our car from point A to point B, or something like that. In object-oriented programming, we try and build models based on our understanding of the world, and we try and build models in our program that represent that. So it's slightly different, or I mean, it's very different. The key takeaway for us for functional programming is this idea of pure functions. Functional programming gets very heavily mathematical really quickly, which is not necessarily something that's going to help us. But it has a number of key ideas that can. They can help us write more efficient code, more performant code, and specifically for us, less buggy code. The perfect example is that of a pure function. So a pure function is one that doesn't have any side effects, and regardless of, or anytime we give it the same input, it will have the same output. So here I have a function which is going to determine whether or not it's currently a leap year. Do we think that this function is pure? Based on just what I've said?
No,
No? Why not?
because every 4 years, it'll be a leap year.
Yeah. So what's our input into our function? Yeah, nothing. We're not providing any input. So our input is null, or nothing. But our output is not always going to be the same. So it's breaking the first rule of functional programming. Remember, the first rule is that when given the same input, it will always return the same output. And the second rule is that it doesn't have any side effects. Do we have any side effects here? A side effect is when a function affects some data outside of its scope.
No.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. So if we think back to when we declared our variables outside of the scope and then changed them within the function, that's a side effect. We can refactor this to be pure, fairly simply. Refactoring is just a fancy word for editing our code with some goal in mind. Here we want to refactor it to make a pure function out of this. Does anybody know a good way, or can anybody think of a good way to do that? Sorry? Jolene, did you say something? No? Yeah?
Combining some of the else ifs into one if.
Yeah, I like your instinct. That's a good thought. But this is going to return, this function is going to return a different value based on the current year, which we're determining right here in line 203. What we can do to make this pure is remove this dependency on the current year from within the function, and instead pass that in as a parameter. So if I do year here, sorry, this should be bar. If I do that, now my function is pure. Because if I call this function with 2017, what will I get back? Will I get true or false? False. And then if I call it again later, will I get the same result?
With 2017.
Yeah, with 2017.
Yeah, it's the same.
Yeah, I'll get the same result. Okay. So when's the next leap year? 2020? Right? So, okay, think ahead, it's 2020. For whatever reason, you're still stuck in this class. And we call this function again, but with the years 2017. Will I get true or false back?
False.
Yeah, I'll still get false back. Whereas before, when we had our dependency on this external context within our function would change depending on the year. Sometimes it would return true, sometimes it would return false. Writing your functions like this will lead to less buggy code and code that is easier to debug because our individual functions won't rely on their context in order to work as we expect them to. So here, our context is the current year. Depending on what the current year is, we'll get a different result. If we were adding and subtracting numbers, and the number was declared outside, no, how can I do this? Yeah, and the number is declared outside. If we call add number 5 100 times, will we always get the same result if the number that we're adding to is defined outside of our function?
Yeah.
Not necessarily, because we could call add number 10 times, always with the same result, but then within that we could add, or each time we'd get a different result, right? Because we'd be adding 5 each time. So we wouldn't get the same number back. Okay. By far and away, most of the bugs that you'll experience will be due to side effects. And so writing your functions like this so that they're pure will help you, 1, avoid them, and 2, if you do have an issue, make it much easier to find them.
So what were the 2 rules for pure functions?
Yeah. A pure function will always return the same output given the same input. And then the second one is that a pure function will never have a side effect. All right. So that wraps up our lecture on functions. The only thing left for you guys to do is to fill out your exit ticket. And then once that's done, I'll be here. I'm happy to answer any questions about anything that we covered today. But otherwise, you're free to go after you've filled out your exit ticket.
Did you post it?
Yep. I think I heard it come out. Yep, there it is.
Shortcuts.
Oh, yeah.
Close to exit ticket as well.
Oh, no, Christine posted.
Actually, the one I was trying to get is like on Sublime to the one that changes your syntax highlighter.
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
And, like, I don't know that one.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, and I
Adam
think
does
you
it
did.
by default.
Like I know it
Oh,
does,
right.
but like if I'm working in papers and HTML, then
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So between them. And right now I have like down there.
I don't know.
I needed something and it showed you like
They showed.
different syntax.
I don't know.
Oh, interesting. I don't remember what I don't know what the command is.
But I can't have.
So if you call this lesson number 5 or 4, it's like,
Yeah, that's right. I go through and I rename them all so that we have our data correct. So classes are 0 indexed,
Right.
just like an array.
But
So
it's
I
not
would call
zero
it 4.
index.
I don't know. I didn't create the exit ticket, so I don't know what it is there.
It starts at 1. That's
So
one.
then this would be 5.
Right.
Oh,
And whoever did that clearly hasn't taken this class because they don't know about 0 indexes.
Colorful.
Filled with color.
Because it's a.
That's fine.
there is a, what's the top